Okay, great. So welcome again to Promoting Equity in the RTP Process. This is a faculty center workshop for RTP evaluators. I'm Emily Berquist, the interim director of the Faculty Center, and I'm joined by Simone Washington, our analyst from Faculty Affairs, who can answer every question that you've ever thought of and then some. So thank you so much for joining us today, Simone. So we will start at the beginning. Hopefully everyone is already familiar with the RTP deadlines for the semester. We are just a few days away from department committee and chair evaluations being due. And I just wanted to let you know if you are reviewing a case for promotion only, we have a second set of deadlines that Simone can really quickly just explain to everyone so we understand what those are for.
Yes, so a few years ago, we had faculty feedback that really requested that they somehow have more time to review the candidate cases. So the Office of Faculty Affairs, our response to that request was to split the deadlines at each level of review to add a promotions only deadline to give evaluators more time to evaluate. So this was a response to a request from faculty as they were evaluating candidate cases, and it seems to be working well for the past 3 years that we've been doing it. And so if you have any feedback on improvements on that, please let us know. But yes, that is why we have the two deadlines for each level of review. And I have added the link to your chat so you can see those additional deadlines.
Thank you so much, Simone. And if you're just joining us, welcome. I'll just let you know again that we are recording this session so I can share it out afterwards. But at the end of the presentation, we will turn off the recording. So if you have any more sensitive questions, we'll be happy to try to help you out as best we can. And if you wanted to go ahead and drop your name in the chat, just for attendance purposes, that would be great. So we can know how many people joined us today. So, as I'm sure you all know, the place to start with all things RTP on our campus is the RTP instructional memo. We'll be sharing out the PowerPoint after today's session along with the recording. And so you can link right to the RTP instructional memo. It is a big document with a lot of different things in it, but that is your first place to start. Um, and then, of course, what other resources are available for our RTP evaluators in addition to the RTP instructional memo? Of course, the 2024 University RTP Policy Implementation Guidelines. This will explain how and when the new RTP policies will be implemented. We have a link with various interfolio resources. I know a lot of the concerns sometimes still center around interfolio. If you're newer, you might not remember the old system with all the binders. I promise the interfolio system, even though it's not perfect, is much better than putting together 7 binders, which just takes so much longer. Also, we have various workshops at Faculty Affairs and the Faculty Center that are related. These are mostly winding down now. The Faculty Affairs website has all sorts of information on there. And of course, the RTP policies themselves. So we've got a link here where you can find the university, college, and department policies. Again, here's the link for our RTP policies. And of course, as you know, there are several different aspects to these. The first being our new university-wide RTP policy, which was passed in 2023 and 2024, which we're so proud of. So many people worked so hard on this to bring greater equity to our campus and to our colleagues. If anyone on this meeting participated, thank you. So you can access the new policy there. Of course, you'll also want to be familiar with the collective bargaining agreement. Article 15 of the collective bargaining agreement governs the implementation of our RTP policy. And then also you can access our college and department RTP policies. I know this is still a little bit confusing because some of them have been finalized and approved and others have not. I wish I had a clearer answer if you are in the second group. What you can do is, of course, the best thing to do is check with your department chair and your college dean. Also, you can look at this list here, and if your college and department are not on there yet, chances are that does mean that they haven't been approved yet. So you'll just want to be sure that you have the correct information so you know that you're evaluating the candidates under the policy that applies. To speak more generally about the new university-wide RTP policy, in case you're not super familiar with it and how it varies from our old one, our new university-wide RTP policy is cutting edge across higher ed in that it really aims to promote equity and allow flexibility in interpretation. It is really a friendly policy designed to help it be easier for evaluators and also easier for candidates. At the center of our new RTP policy is diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, something that we're very proud of. And in particular, our new university-wide policy recognizes the existence of cultural and or identity and or race-based taxation and how it impacts candidates' life and work. So we're really proud that our university managed to get that into our policy. Another thing that our new policy emphasizes is faculty mentoring and formative feedback. So now it is viewed as important underneath our RISCA policy for faculty to be mentored by others in their teaching, particularly, but also in other aspects of their work. In terms of formative feedback, what we're thinking about here is that it's important now for candidates to describe how they seek feedback from their students and how they use it to improve their classes and their teaching. The new RTP policy also recognizes different forms of RISCA, which is something that really helps us be a more inclusive campus with our colleagues who do different types of RISCA, such as community engaged scholarship or the scholarship of teaching and learning. Our new our new RTP policy also clarifies, and this really isn't any different from our old one, that all faculty must contribute to shared governance. The emphasis is a little stronger this time than the last policy. We also emphasize continued professional development. So if a candidate shows that they have been seeking professional development, mentoring in their teaching, mentoring in their work on campus, this is viewed as a positive thing under our policy. And finally, this is also the same as before, but I just want to reiterate that all faculty are evaluated in the same three areas, right? Instruction and instructionally related activities, RISCA, and service. The policy now makes clear that each category can have a different weight depending on the candidate's strengths. So for example, if you have someone who hasn't done all that much RISCA, but has done intense service work, the committee can choose to weigh that service work maybe a little more than they would in a different case. Any questions so far? So in the RTP file, what are candidates including? Candidates are including their candidate status sheet, their professional data sheet, their CV, their narrative, index of supplementary materials, any additional documents required by the college and or department, student evaluation summaries, documented evidence supporting instructional activities, RISCA, and service, prior reviews, including mini reviews, rebuttals, if any, and the RTP policy under which they are choosing to be evaluated. Again, candidates this year have a choice. So as a committee, we want to be very clear which policy we're assessing a candidate under. What are some other materials that will be included in the RTP file? Any letters received during open period will be placed in the open period materials section of the file. Any letters of support and/or evaluation solicited directly by the candidate will be placed in the supplemental materials section of the file. So here, what we're talking about is if a candidate seeks someone who's in their research field to just provide a letter to talk about a little bit more of context for what their RISCA does. And that's, again, something that the candidate solicits themselves. If the candidate would like to add materials to the file after submission, for example, if they find out they have an article accepted for publication, or they get a new batch of spot scores that they'd like to include, all of these items must be approved by the college committee. And if the committee needs to seek missing materials, the candidate will send these to the college RTP coordinator, and the candidate will decide which section they will go in. Any questions so far? Okay, let's clarify a little bit on open period. I'm sure we're all aware, but just to be sure we are all on the same page. Open period allows other faculty, students, administrators, staff, and even the community to submit statements and opinions about the person being reviewed. Open period has a specific time frame each year. This year, it is August 22nd to September 12th. Open period is announced when the department office posts a notice for candidates undergoing RTP action, inviting community members to contribute letters. Open period submissions cannot be anonymous, nor can they be solicited by the candidate. Candidates get 5 days notice before any materials are placed in their file. They are able to respond to or rebut to any open period material during the open period. Open period material is to be placed in a separate section of the RTP file, and you may only request removal of open period material because of inaccuracy. Please note, open period letters are not letters of support solicited by the candidate, right? So we're distinguishing open period letters from, for example, myself writing to a colleague to contextualize my research, right? That's a different type of letter. Remember, CSULB does not require external letters of support for RTP actions. If you wish to include them, you must solicit them yourself, and they will then be included in the supplemental materials section of your file. Additions to the file after submission. Things candidates might add after submission could include new teaching evaluations and supplemental RISCA info, such as notice of an accepted publication. These have to be approved by the college RTP committee. When the candidate includes new materials, the entire file then returns to the department committee for their review before moving back into the rest of the review process. If evaluators find a file is missing information, they may request the missing information at any point. However, the addition of this material triggers the return to the level at which you should have provided the information in the first place. I'd also like to talk for a minute about early tenure and promotion. Do we have anyone here who is reviewing an early tenure and/or promotion case? You could just raise your hand on the reactions. Okay, looks like we've got one. Great. So we've got the link here for the university-wide RTP policy. It's section 5.5 for more information on early tenure and promotion. A potential candidate should receive initial guidance from the department chair and dean regarding the criteria and expectations for early tenure and promotion. Early tenure and promotion are granted only in exceptional circumstances and for compelling reasons. Assistant professors may apply for early promotion, early tenure, or both. Tenured associate professors may apply for early promotion to full professor. However, Non-tenured associate professors may not apply for early promotion to full professor without also seeking early tenure. Early tenure may be granted in exceptional cases when a candidate demonstrates a record of distinction in all three areas of evaluation that clearly exceeds in substantial ways the requirements in department policies. Colleges and departments must make clear what qualifies as exceeding in substantial ways. The candidate's record must inspire confidence that the pattern of a strong overall performance will continue. In addition, candidates for early tenure are encouraged to participate in the external evaluation process according to the Academic Senate policy on external evaluation of research, scholarly, and creative activities. To receive a favorable recommendation for early promotion to associate professor or full professor, a candidate must achieve a record of distinction in all three areas that clearly exceeds in substantial ways the requirements in department policies. Colleges and departments must make clear what qualifies as exceeding in substantial ways. Any questions on that? Okay. Um, we'll talk a little bit about the candidate response and rebuttal process. As I'm sure you know, candidates are entitled to either respond, which means to clarify, or rebut, which means to challenge reviews that they receive. Each response or rebuttal will become part of their file. Candidates have 10 days from the day on which they receive their evaluation to respond or rebut. Responses and/or rebuttals do not extend the evaluation deadline. Please note, candidates should address their responses and rebuttals to the next level of review, i.e., if they are responding to the department evaluation, they should address their response to the college committee. If a committee completes a review late, and there are not 10 calendar days before the candidate's file moves on to the next level of review, candidates still have 10 calendar days to respond or rebut to an evaluation. During this time, the file continues to move through the process according to the original deadlines. Candidates submitting a response or rebuttal who wish to submit new materials must follow the steps in the previous slide, additions to the file after submission. And please remember, response and rebuttal and adding new materials are two different processes. I'll talk a little bit more about Interfolio, mainly to direct you to the wonderful resources we have that Simone has helped connect us with. So you can find our step-by-step guide to Interfolio at the link here. And you can also find Interfolio video tutorials at the second link. And finally, we recommend that you use the Google Chrome search engine with Interfolio. Hopefully you'll have a good experience with Interfolio. Again, it's much easier than dealing with binders and paper. So what should evaluators do when they're evaluating an RTP file? The first thing that you want to do is verify that your committee's composition is aligned with department, college, and university requirements. Next, you'll want to verify that the candidate has included all necessary primary and supplemental materials in their file. If for some reason the evaluating committee will not be able to meet its deadline, the evaluating committee can request an extension. The committee should work with the college RTP coordinator and remember to notify the candidates of the delay. Evaluating committee members can only review each candidate's file one time, i.e., you cannot review the same file if you're serving on both the department and the college committee. Everything that's been uploaded to Interfolio must remain. And if you modify your committee's evaluation after it has been submitted, you must leave the original evaluation and add the revised evaluation as well. And if someone on the committee does not agree with the majority report, they are welcome to submit a minority report along with the other evaluation. So what should evaluators avoid? Remember, your work is important. Please be aware of deadlines and meet them so the candidate can proceed through the RTP process in a timely fashion. Your work is confidential. Please do not share confidential information with anyone other than fellow committee members. Please do not ignore emails about your cases that come directly from Interfolio. We've had people in the past think that these were scams or phishing. They are not. Please do not share out your candidate review via email. If you'd like to share your candidate review with the other committee members, please use Interfolio to do so. Similarly, please do not use Teams or Zoom for storing or sharing candidate information. We need to be sure that all of this is very confidential and protected. And committees are welcome to update and or replace their candidate review file at any time prior to the deadline. If you need to revise after the deadline, you can do so as well.
I want to make a slight modification to what
Yes,
we said.
yes.
If you want to share any evaluation material with other committee members, you would do that in a secure way other than email. So maybe a OneDrive file or a SharePoint file or something secure. But anything that's uploaded to Interfolio is considered a final committee document. So only put what is being meant to be submitted and shared with candidates in Interfolio. Please let me know if that needs further clarification.
Thank you so much, Simone. Looks like we've got a question on that.
Hey, Simone and Emily. I'm Colleen. I'm in the Department of Dance. Since SharePoint and Teams are not Teams, the chat, but when you have a Teams like that has files, right? Like for a department, and you can actually have separate channels that are locked. Are you seeing that as different than SharePoint? Like you want to distinguish between those things?
So what we're really referring to here is the chats that are going on if committees decide to meet via Teams or Zoom.
Okay.
Those files are not necessarily secure in the chat, but
Yeah.
you just described that you've created a channel that's locked, so that's an
Mhm.
added level of security. Ultimately, any documents related to evaluation will need to be deleted after your
Yes.
evaluation period anyways. And it's just helpful to have the documents all in one place in a secured place so that you can remember where to go back to delete them. And also the chats themselves is not a secure place to exchange evaluation related information.
Yeah, no, that's like yeah, this is just instead of having to make a to request like a whole other SharePoint
Mm-hmm.
because we can do this internally and I have a staff member that's the administrator, so we take the faculty off of it at the end of the cycle and remove the documents from that so that it's really just the people that are on the review committee at that time that have access to that.
Yes, that's
Okay.
fine. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Did anyone have any other questions on this? Okay, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about external evaluations of RISCA. We've got our policy statement 1010 that governs this. That's linked here in the PowerPoint. I'll be sharing this out for you. I think we've only got one person in here who's dealing with an early tenure and promotion case. Faculty who are applying for early tenure and promotion are encouraged to seek external evaluation of their RISCA. This process is best begun in the semester that just passed. So for someone being evaluated now, it would have been better to begin that process last spring. Candidates themselves can initiate external evaluations, but committees are also able to do so. And when an external evaluation is happening through this official process, the candidates provide a list of 3 experts in the field, and the department provides a list of 3 different experts. External evaluators should be, of course, recognized experts in the field, and they should not have a close personal relationship with the candidate, i.e., be their dissertation advisor. Obviously, CSULB faculty cannot serve as external evaluators for other CSULB faculty. The external evaluator is not looking at the entire file in this case. They're being asked to look at RISCA, and they are going to write an evaluation that talks about how the candidate's RISCA contributes to their field. Candidates will have no fewer than 2 and no more than 4 external evaluations included in their file. And these evaluations are considered additional evidence. Please note that in the case of external evaluations of RISCA, faculty affairs will correspond with the external evaluators, and faculty affairs will keep track of them about the deadlines for their evaluation. So let's talk a little, do we have a question?
I just wanted to add that the deadline for this year is tomorrow. So if you are expecting any external evaluation letters, the deadline is tomorrow.
Thank you, Simone. So how should evaluators assess a candidate's instruction and instructionally related activities? So I think a great place to start, obviously, is going to be the form that you're given to do the evaluations. So, one way that people can write their evaluation of a candidate is to sort of review the file and then answer these questions and use that to start being the focus of your evaluation. And please note that spring 2020 spot summaries are not required for submission due to COVID-19. But what are some other ways that we can evaluate a candidate's instruction and instructionally related activities? First, we want to highlight that as per the new university-wide RTP policy, quote, colleges and departments should employ multiple modes of evidence when assessing teaching effectiveness and must not rely significantly on student perceptions of teaching forms as evidence. So the multiple modes of evidence to assess instruction and instructionally related activities can include the candidate narrative, third-party classroom observations. So for example, if someone in the department chair visited the individual's class during instruction, or perhaps they worked with someone from the faculty formative feedback project, that could be included. Spot scores, instructional materials, so classroom work, student work, and of course, informal mid-semester evaluations administered by the candidate. And it would be wise for the candidate to include some discussion of how they responded to this data in reconstructing the rest of their course. Also, we want to highlight, right, if we are promoting equity and inclusion as much as possible in our RTP evaluations, we would all like to be thoughtful of how we evaluate spot scores in a candidate's given file. The CBA says we need to include spot scores, and spot scores are a very important way for us to get feedback from our students. But at the same time, we also know that there are a lot of problems inherent in the student evaluation process. For example, faculty who have a really small size, for a small sample size for a given course, I'm sure we've all been in that boat, where we had 20 students in the room and we only got 5 responses to the spot form, especially since these have gone online. If you are not yet full professor, that can really harm the way your spot scores appear. So we want to be careful of that when we're looking at how the spot scores appear in the file. Also, we would like to try to keep in mind that academic research shows that student evaluation scores are sometimes centered in 1 or maybe 2 different types of bias. The first bias would be what we would call environmental bias. So that's something like the class was at 8 a.m., so the students thought it was too hard because they were still tired. The students didn't like the classroom because it was too cold or too far across campus. Or perhaps the course is known as a gatekeeping course that many people struggle to do well in. That could also affect student well-being or happiness in the course. And then the other type of bias that instructors experience with their student evaluation scores is, of course, equity bias. And this would be bias towards the instructor because of some aspect or perceived aspect of their identity. For example, this could include being a woman, being a faculty member of color, being differently abled, being a non-native speaker of English, having children. There's all sorts of things that students can sometimes not evaluate us fairly about. So if a candidate mentions in their narrative that they experienced this, it would be a good idea for the committee to take their claim seriously and consider whether that may have actually happened. Also, when you are evaluating faculty performance in a given course, you can arrive at a more equitable assessment by keeping the following factors in mind. Should the faculty member share the relevant information in their narrative and/or file? Please note the second part of that. Should the faculty member share the relevant information? If the faculty member doesn't come forward and share the relevant information, obviously there's no way for you to know about it and for you to include it in the evaluation that your committee writes. But what kind of things might candidates talk about in a given course? They could talk about the course level, the type of course, whether it is online asynchronous, writing intensive, capstone, research-based, etc. They could talk about the number of students enrolled versus the number of spot responses. They can talk about whether this was a new preparation for them, which, as we all know, can sometimes mean a course is a little bumpier when you're first rolling it out. They could talk about the number of new preparations they had during the semester in question. They could also talk about how well the course SCO aligns with their expertise and/or training. We have certainly cases where people are asked to teach courses that are somewhat outside of their expertise, and that, of course, can affect their scores. You also would want to look at the candidate's efforts to improve teaching effectiveness in the course. So mid-semester evaluations, pivoting approaches, and response to student feedback. And of course, trends over time in spot scores for the course. Do I have any questions at this point? Okay, I've got one more slide with some ideas for how to equitably evaluate instruction and instructionally related activities. As evaluators, you might want to consider the following questions. How did the candidate reflect on their teaching and make improvements? How did the candidate employ formative assessment or real-time feedback from students in their instruction? How did the candidate employ summative assessment or larger assignments aligned with the course learning outcomes in their instruction? Did the candidate participate in any professional development opportunities designed to enhance teaching effectiveness? If any weaknesses are noted in the courses, did the candidate make attempts to address these or to do so in the future? Did the candidate develop any new courses? And how did the candidate contribute to curriculum growth at the department level? You might want to consider past evaluations. Has the candidate made efforts to advance in any areas that may have been flagged for improvement in prior evaluations? You might want to consider what the candidate did to mentor or supervise students. For example, did they work on an honors thesis, do independent studies, etc.? You might want to note if the candidate reveals to you that they have made any special efforts to reach historically marginalized student groups. And finally, we would like you to remember that cultural and/or identity taxation and race-based cultural taxation can affect our faculty in all three areas of evaluation. If a candidate identifies themselves as having experienced this in the instructional context, it is up to RTP evaluators to follow the RTP policy and take the burden of cultural taxation seriously. Any questions on how we might evaluate the RISCA of our colleagues? Okay, let's move on to how should evaluators address a candidate's RISCA. And here is our department level evaluator form. Very simple, asking you to look at the RISCA that has been produced, asking you to assess how much this RISCA contributes to the advancement of the discipline, asking you to address whether the candidate has met department and or college expectations for RISCA, and to evaluate any other evidence of RISCA contributions. So basically, when we're talking about RISCA under our new policy, we want to remember that candidates should have sustained and ongoing RISCA. A big change from our prior RTP policy is that now we recognize different types of RISCA. For example, these include the Scholarship of Discovery, which is a way to say traditional peer-reviewed RISCA, journal publications, books, etc. But we also recognize now the Scholarship of Integration, which is building connections across disciplines, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, for example, people whose main research connects to pedagogy, and the Scholarship of Application and or Engagement, sometimes also known as Community Engaged Scholarship. So by considering all of these different types of RISCA as just as valuable as peer-reviewed publications, our university has gone a long way to recognize the many contributions of our different colleagues and our connection to our community. We also hope that candidates make clear how their RISCA contributes to their discipline or to their community. And evaluators should consider that in writing their evaluations. You'd also want to look at whether the candidate has received external and or internal grants. And again, most basically, you're going to look at those RISCA outputs, right? Whatever they are, peer-reviewed articles, publications, policy documents. We have a much more flexible policy now. Questions on that? Okay, so the last piece of your evaluation of a candidate will be evaluating the candidate's service. So here, our evaluator form is very simple. Evaluate the service activities, address whether they have met expectations, and evaluate any that goes above and beyond. So what are some of our best practices for evaluating service? First, we want to remember that shared governance or service is central to our institution, and it's also central in our new RTP policy. When you're looking at how a candidate discusses their service contributions, you want to consider how the candidate identified their role and their specific contributions for any given service work. Hopefully, the candidate will have described to you how their service work contributed to the shared values and goals of the department, college, university, community, and or the profession. You'll also want to think about whether the candidate has identified themselves as a faculty member who has experienced cultural and or identity taxation, and if so, you can consider what they told you about how that may have impacted their service work. And for tenure, candidates may focus primarily on service at the department and college level. However, by promotion, they should demonstrate university level service as well. So this is going to come to we've reached the end of my official presentation part of our workshop today. So here you have our email, so you can reach out to us if you have any questions.